the ball is yours.
One or the other, right?
Confident.
Give it to us, yo.
Yeah.
All in.
All in. You all in. All in.
I am at the parking lot looking for parking right now. Yeah, I really wanted to get a poker session in today to capture for you guys. I had a decision to make, which I'll kind of share my thought process with you guys. So first of all, my options for casino poker rooms are actually very limited. I am still effectively banned from half of the casinos in BC. So today I was either going to go to Parq Vancouver, that's in downtown Vancouver, or River Rock Casino, that's in Richmond. Parq Vancouver, they have 1-3, they have 2-5, they have 1-2 PLO, and later on in the day they sometimes have 5-10 PLO. I would most like to play 2-5. However, Parq Vancouver is 45 minutes away from where I live. Yeah, so we factor in round trip back and forth, that is at least 1.5 hours. And that's a lot of commute time. That's 1.5 hours taken away from the poker session, right, that I'm gonna be in. And River Rock in Richmond is only 10 minutes away from where I live, but they only have 1-3. They only spread 1-3 for some reason. So yeah, if you were in my spot, what would you guys do? Would you go to Parq Vancouver or would you go to River Rock Casino?
This hand, I pick up ace-9 in the hijack position. Everyone folds to me and I open to $10. Only the big blind defends. It's heads up into a flop of ace-7-6 with 2 hearts. The villain checks. Great flop hitting top pair. I c-bet for $5. He calls. The turn is the king of hearts. The villain checks again. With my tiny c-bet on the flop, I think I kept in a really wide range of hands, especially from the big blind defender. Now that there are more draws on the board, I decide that I can target more value with top pair. I size up and bet $30, and the villain folds. This hand, I pick up ace-6 of spades on the button. The low jack limps. The hijack raises to $6, and the action folds to me. In position with a suited ace, against a late position limper and raiser, I decide that this is a good spot to attack the dead money. I 3-bet to $25. Everyone folds except for the initial raiser. It's heads up into a flop of ace-queen-jack with 2 clubs and 1 spade. The villain leads out for $30. Already I'm not liking it. This board smashes my range, and I also hit top pair. With no kicker though, I really don't see myself beating any value hands. I'm pretty sure a dry queen X or a jack X is not going to be betting out here. But then again, I do have top pair and backdoor spade draw. I call. The turn is the 9 of hearts. The villain now checks. Makes me a bit more at ease, but I still feel his initial flop bet is very strong. My kicker already doesn't play. I check back and basically try to navigate the showdown. The river is the 7 of clubs. The villain checks again. With this runout, I'm happy to take a showdown. I check back. The villain shows ace queen, and that's a very nice hand. This hand, I pick up 6-8 of clubs in the big blind. The hijack limps, the button limps. The small blind calls, and I check my option. It's 4-handed into a flop of king 7-3 with 2 clubs. The small blind checks. I flop a flush draw with backdoor straight possibility, which is great, but multi-way out of position, playing it slow and passively is more than okay. However, this is a limp pot. So I'm thinking that a strong king X is not likely in anyone's range. I decide to take a more aggressive route. I bet out $10. Winning now is always good, and maybe if I just get one caller, I think I have opportunities to take it down with a second or third barrel, depending on the run out. And everyone calls. The turn is 8 of hearts. The small blind checks to me again. Don't hit my flush, but I do hit a pair of 8s, giving me second pair now. I definitely don't think it's good because surely one or more of the villains have King X calling the flop bet. Having picked up extra equity, I don't feel like slowing down. I continue to bet, this time sizing up to $50. Multi-way out of position, this is probably not that wise, but at the moment, I'm thinking that no one can really be that strong here. Just flat calling the flop with an obvious flush draw. If I want to continue repping strength, slowing down would not make sense. And with this sizing, I'm setting up for a big river bet on some cards, depending on the run out. The hijack and button both call. The river is a 3. I miss my flush, and I don't think I'm winning at showdown with my hand. I do like this card a lot though. My biggest concern was someone slow playing all the way with a really strong hand like a set. Set of 3s is less likely now. Set of kings is not going to be in the mix with no preflop raise. I blocked a set of 8s. Looking at everyone's stacks, I think that if I do go for a third barrel, there's only one sizing left, and that's to go all in. I jam. I normally would recommend against this, that is bluffing multi-way. Unless all the stars aligned, and this is one of those spots. I have a hand that can't win at showdown. My betting line somewhat makes sense. Some of the very nutted hands are blocked based on the board, my hand and preflop ranges, so I just go for it. Luckily, everyone folds, and I get this one through. This hand, I pick up pocket 8s in the low jack position. The middle position limps. I raise it to $15. Only the hijack calls. It's heads up into a flop of deuce 5-5 with 2 spades. Very good flop for pocket 8s. I decide to take this one slow though, being out of position against someone I read as a competent player that covers my stack. I check. The villain bets $15. I call. The turn is a 6. I check again. The villain bets again, this time for $30. I call again. The river is the king of spades. Not the cleanest run out, as the flush gets there. I think check calling is the best play here. I check. The villain thinks for a bit and checks back. I happily table my hand, and the villain mucks. This hand, I pick up pocket jacks in the hijack position. The low jack limps. I raise it to $15. Only the big blind and low jack calls. It's 3-way into a flop of 4-5-7 rainbow. Everyone checks to me. Pretty good flop for pocket jacks. I c-bet for $30. Both villains call. The turn is a 3. The big blind checks. The low jack now goes all in for only $25, and the action's on me. Interesting spot. A very obvious open-ender got there on the turn. But the sizing is just so small in proportion to the pot. With the stack depth that the low jack had to start with, I just believe he was committed anyways. He could have 6x, but even if he had something like 8-9, 7-8, or any weaker pocket pair, I think he's still putting his chips in here. For such a cheap price, I call. Being pretty hopeful that maybe the big blind was just floating with junk or being a non-believer, and we get out of the way. The big blind, though, also calls. The river is a 6, completing the straight on board. The big blind checks, and nothing to do here except check back. We table our hands, and both the villains have a 6 for the straight on turn, one with 10-6 and the other with queen-6. I get bailed out on the river, and we chop this pot 3 ways. This hand, I pick up ace-jack of hearts in the low jack position. Under the gun +1 limps, and I raise it to $15. The button, big blind, and initial limper all call. It's 4-way into a flop of queen-10 queen with 2 hearts. It gets checked to me. Looks like a pretty flop as I have a royal flush draw, but it is multi-way and a paired board. I just check. The button checks back. The turn is a 9. Everyone checks again. The river is an ace. The action checks to me. I managed to hit top pair. Very likely the best hand. Based on the previous action, don't think anyone will check a queen all the way on a draw heavy board. My jack kicker plays, so I decide to go for a small value bet. I bet $15, basically targeting any 2-pair hand or someone else also spiking the ace on the river with the weaker kicker. But everyone folds. This hand, I pick up King Jack of Diamonds at the cutoff. The middle position opens to $10. The action folds to me. I think I can mix between calling and 3-betting here. I have a pretty aggressive image so far, so in position with a nice drawing hand, I decide to cold call this one. The button also calls. It's 3-way into a flop of Jack 10-5 rainbow with 1 diamond. The middle position, the aggressor, checks. I flop top pair with the king kicker, very likely the best hand. I just bet out $15 for value. The button calls. The middle position also calls. The turn is an ace. The middle position checks. This is just about the worst card to see. Although I pick up a gut shot, I no longer have top pair. Ace queen, ace king, king queen, all beat me. Even ace 10 is logical holding that could call the flop. I just check. The button checks back. The river is an 8. The middle position now bets out $40. I don't see any bluffs here, and there just aren't any value hands I can possibly beat with only second pair. I let this one go. I'm done with this hand, but the action gets pretty wild. The button then raises to $105. The middle position thinks for a bit, and then goes over the top all in for around $280. The button ends up folding, so unfortunately we don't get to see any reveals. Let me know in the comments what you guys think they were holding. This hand, I pick up ace queen in the low jack position. I open to $10, only the big blind defends. It's heads up into a flop of 8-9-5 with 2 diamonds. The villain checks. 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw is not too bad, but the board is not in my range. I check back. The turn is a king. The villain checks again. Now, this is a turn card that is in my range. I also block ace king and king queen. I now go for a delayed c-bet of $15. And the villain folds. This hand, I pick up king queen in the big blind. There's a button straddle to $6. I call. Everyone folds to the cutoff, who raises to $20. The button calls. I call again to close the action. It's 3-way into a flop of king 10-8 with 2 diamonds. Great flop hitting top pair, but out of position, multi-way, I just check. The cutoff c-bets for $30. The button calls. Don't think my hand is quite strong enough to check raise. I just call. The turn is a jack of diamonds. I pick up an open ender, but there's now a flush possibility on board, which I unblock. I check again. The cutoff bets again, this time for $40. The button folds. My top pair is looking really dicey now. Any king X would beat me, unless he's doing this with king 9. But the sizing is very small, and he is the aggressor, so I think there's still a chance that he's doing this with something like ace 10 or ace jack with ace of diamonds. And if he does have a value hand that is not a made flush, I still have outs with my open ender. I call. The river is the 6 of diamonds. I check. The villain bets $70, very value heavy. With this runout and his line, I just don't think I can beat anything. Even the few hands I can beat on the turn, I'm now beat on the river. I let this one go. This hand, I pick up ace-6 of diamonds in the hijack position. Under the gun straddles to $6. The low jack calls. I raise it to $35 to attack the dead money. Everyone folds except for the low jack. It's heads up into a flop of 8-9-9 with 2 hearts and 1 diamond. The villain checks. Got nothing but ace high and backdoors. I c-bet for $35. The villain calls. The turn is a 4 of hearts. The villain checks again. With the front door flush draw completing and a board that doesn't favor my range, I don't think a second barrel is wise here. I check back. The river is the deuce of hearts, putting a 4-card flush on the board. The villain checks yet again. Pretty certain my hand is not good enough to win at showdown. With the villain's line and the board being scary enough, I think I can take a jab. I can rep the ace of diamonds or any high card diamond, pot controlling the turn, and then going for value here. I slide out $100 and the villain snap folds. That concludes my session. something I used to do more in my earlier episodes is capture some of my food expeditions. I haven't done so in a while, but I do enjoy sharing with you guys. So here's a place in Richmond my wife and I decided to check out recently for lunch. It's another day, and I'm back at River Rock to fit in a short session before dinner. This hand, I pick up Ace Deuce at the cutoff, under the gun +1 limps, and the action folds to me. I decide to raise it up to $15 to attack the dead money or isolate. The small blind and the original limper both call. It's three-way into a flop of Ace 8-4 Rainbow. Everyone checks to me. Great flop hitting top pair, I c-bet for $10. I go for a really small sizing because it's a dry board, it's multi-way, and the ace-high board is in my range, so I'm mostly just targeting value from 8x or 4x. The small blind folds. Under the gun +1 check raises to $25. My top pair with no kicker is kind of dicey now, I think, but I still have position. The villain's raise size is pretty small, and my small bet could be inducing some check raises from non-believing 8x or weaker pocket pairs, etc. I call. The turn is a 3 of hearts. The villain bets $40. I think his range now leans towards a better ace or even something stronger than one pair. I do pick up extra equity though, now with a gut shot as well as top pair, so I decide to call again. The river is a 6 of hearts. The villain now checks. I actually contemplate a bit here if I need to turn my hand into a bluff. In the end, I decide that I just have too much showdown value with top pair. There's a chance that I'm beating some weaker pairs that didn't believe me on the flop and randomly barreled on the turn. A bit too thin to target those for value. I check back. We table our hands, and the villain shows Ace Queen of Hearts. Yep, that's the nut flush. Well played, sir. This hand, I pick up King 5 of diamonds in the hijack position. The low jack limps. I raise it to $15 to try and isolate the late position limper. The button, small blind, and original limper all call. It's four-way into a flop of Deuce Deuce Queen Rainbow. Everyone checks. The turn is an ace of hearts. The action checks to me. Since everyone checked the flop and two villains have checked twice now, I decide to rep my range with the ace out there. I bet $35, hoping everyone just missed and I can take it down now. Only the small blind calls. The river is a brick. The villain checks again. Don't think I can win at showdown with my hand. With his flat call on the turn, he is likely holding Queen X or Ace X. I decide to go for a bet of $100. I'm mostly trying to fold out Queen X. It would be tough for him to fold an ace, but I do block Ace King, and my line does make sense with that holding. After a bit of tanking, he does find a fold. This hand, I pick up 6-4 of clubs on the button. There are 3 limpers before the action is on me. Having an aggressive image, I decide to overlimp this hand with position. The small blind folds. The big blind raises to $20. Under the gun +1 calls. The hijack calls. Closing the action, I also call. It's four-way into a flop of 10-7-4 Rainbow. Everyone checks to me. I managed to catch bottom pair, but in a multi-way pot, I just check back. The turn is a jack of hearts. The big blind, the initial aggressor, now bets out $20. Everyone folds to me. Pretty small sizing. I think there are a lot of hands he could be doing this with, including Ace King, King Queen, Ace Queen. A type of hand that picked up equity with a jack on the turn, and then now deciding to take a jab since everyone checked the flop. I also unblock the hearts draw. Even if I'm not in the lead, with his sizing, it doesn't feel like he's that strong either. I decide to call in position. The river is a 9. The villain bets $35. This feels like a blocker bet, trying to get the showdown. And now I think my bottom pair is not good enough to win at showdown. The board is pretty scary. Any 8 makes a straight. Since the villain raised pre-flop out of position, it's just super unlikely for him to have 8x combos, aside from pocket 8s. So I think this is a good spot to turn my bottom pair into a bluff. I raise it up to $150. And the villain folds. This hand, I pick up King Queen at under the gun +1. I open to $10. The middle position, cutoff, and button all call. It's four-way into a flop of King 10 Deuce Rainbow. Hitting top pair, I c-bet for $20. Only the middle position calls. The turn is a 7. I just continue betting for value, targeting weaker King X and non-believing 10X. I bet $45. The villain calls. The river is a jack. This is an interesting card that isn't great for me, I think. Some hands I was targeting include King Jack and 10 Jack combos, so those now beat me. But he could also have a straight draw type hand like Queen Jack or 9 Jack, which now has a pair. In general, going for 3 streets of value with top pair can be a little bit too ambitious sometimes, but for this session, I think my aggressive image allows me to do so. As far as one pair hands go, I likely do have the best one. I bet $50. I go with this sizing because I think it's small enough to get some calls with weaker hands, but also big enough to not induce a raise that puts me in a tough spot. And the villain folds. This hand, I pick up Ace King in the middle position. Under the gun opens to $15. The action folds to me. I would normally 3-bet with my hand, however, the open size is actually on the larger side, and is from under the gun, a strong range, and also a player that I read as competent, who happens to have a stack size close to mine at this point. I cold call this one. The hijack also calls. It's 3-way into a flop of Deuce 5-7 with 2 spades. Under the gun c-bets for $30. With the backdoor nut flush draw, also on a board that shouldn't be in the villain's range at all, I call. The hijack also calls. The turn is a 4. Under the gun now checks. If it were heads up, I'd definitely be barreling now, but with the hijack also calling the flop, I don't think it's wise to do so anymore. I check. The hijack checks back. The river is an ace. Under the gun now bets $25. Feels like a blocker bet wanting to get the showdown, and that is actually very good for me. I might even have done the same thing with my hand if I were in his position. No point in raising for value as I think it's a bit too thin multi-way, but I happily call. Having spiked top pair, top kicker. The hijack folds. We table our hands, and I beat Ace Queen. And now to report on the results of this episode. I shared with you guys 2 sessions this episode. Session number 1 was 1-3 at River Rock. I bought in for $500 and I cashed out with $640. That's a profit of $140. Session number 2 was also 1-3 at River Rock. I bought in for $500 and I cashed out with $665. That's a profit of $165. And that is the end of the results. I do realize that my video uploading has been infrequent. There's no particular reason for that. I have just been a little bit busy and a little bit lazy. For my next video, I will be sharing a few 2-5 sessions that I have already captured once I get around to editing them. As I can remember, I did not run too well. And I guess that's another thing that adds to it. I don't particularly look forward to reliving and editing sessions where I ran bad or made a lot of mistakes, etc. But that's just a psychological thing. Main thing is I just gotta push myself to not be so lazy. And admittedly, I can be very lazy sometimes. Lastly, just want to say Happy New Year. This is going to be my first video of 2025. Thank you so much for all of your support. And please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. And I hope you guys look forward to the next.